So your next speaker is me. I'm Dr Samantha Pearman-Kanza. I work at the University of Southampton. I have been deeply invested in electronic lab notebooks, digitally capturing and preserving the scientific record, and basically having better data capture and data management in scientific labs for over the last decade. I studied these topics extensively as part of my PhD, sort of understanding, all the barriers and issues around implementing these things and why people weren't adopting them. And I have to be honest, it seemed like an absolutely insurmountable challenge. In fact, the first paper I ever published about this in 2018 was entitled ELNs, Can They Replace Paper? And one of my thoughts about the academic setting at the point was actually no. And one of the key findings in my PhD was that people weren't ready to give up paper. So I'm absolutely delighted that we've made so much progress at Southampton, that also my colleagues within this group have also made so much progress at their universities. And I'm now going to talk to you about how we have trialled and implemented Revvity Signals in our chemistry research labs at Southampton. So I've been so excited and wanting to do this for such a long time. And the stars finally kind of aligned, an opportunity came up, and Simon Coles, who I believe is here, who is our PI of PSDI, very generously donated some PSDI time and resource to making this happen. And we decided to trial Revvity Signals in our department. So as with every good trial, we should be trying to answer some questions. So essentially what we were really trying to understand is, firstly, would our department benefit from an ELN in general, but also, does the ELN that we have chosen meet our needs? Does it meet the school's needs? And does it actually enhance our workflows? Because I think what's really important when we implement digital systems, we shouldn't just be digitally replacing our paper-based practices, we should be looking to improve them. Poor practices translated into digital form are arguably not much better than if they're already on paper. So if we are actually going to implement ELNs properly, we should be thinking very mindfully about how we can make sure we're actually capturing and preserving the scientific record really well, so that people can actually make use of our data records. So in terms of our design, now I will say implementing ELNs is becoming a lot more feasible, but it is complicated and it takes dedicated time and effort. And what I really wanted to kind of highlight here is we started thinking about this and planning for it in July 2024. We didn't launch it until January 2025. So we did actually have a 6-month session of planning it, working out how we were going to trial it, doing all the pre-trial work, which I'll explain. And I do think that, obviously I appreciate time, money, that's not always possible, but having the time to actually do this properly, I think was really instrumental in its success. We had then a trial phase from January to October. We did evaluations, we actually did a lot of pre-data gathering at the beginning, and then we did evaluations at sort of mid-checkpoint at the end. We had very successful results, and as a consequence, we were okay to actually roll it out across the whole school. So we have rolled it out to the postgraduates and researchers, and we're now in the phase of doing the undergrad rollout, which Philip is leading for our team. So in terms of the trial, we have 5 different sections in our school, and we had 12 groups within that take part in the trial, because we really wanted to make sure that we had representation across the different domains, subdomains of chemistry. And as a spoiler, I already said, we picked the Revvity Signals ELN, and we actually had, I think, 30 different researchers across those groups take part in that trial, and all the group leaders took part, of course, as well. So they were able to give us different feedback about how the different areas worked. So ELN selection is really complicated. Obviously, if you're going to trial a system, you need to decide what system you're going to use. But there are over 85 ELNs on the market. I really want to emphasize here, there is no right answer. It's more about picking what works for you and actually that implementation journey that you go on. So thinking about, who are we implementing this for? Why are we implementing it? What domains do we need to cover? What feature requirements matter to us? Again, can we afford the licenses? Or if it's a setup, can we afford, to pay our staff to do the open source setup? Depending, there's always costs associated. So what actually works for your institution? So for us, Revvity Signals was an obvious choice. It was a large-scale ELN tool. Very importantly, and a very key factor is it is heavily compatible with ChemDraw, because it's made by the same people, and people in our department are very wedded to ChemDraw. And in fact, feedback we've had in the past, both about, feedback from Philip's study, people wanted to have more of that sort of domain-based features, When I looked at chemistry software in the past to see what was most popular, you know, ELNs aside, it was always that chemical drawing software. So that was really, really important. So that's the ELN that we picked, but all of the learnings and things from our trial could be applied to pretty much any ELN or ERN. So something that was really important that we did at the beginning was we identified our stakeholders for this trial. So again, this video is going to go on YouTube. We will share the slides afterwards and put them on the website. So I'm not expecting you to read all this at this point, but I guess it's just to highlight that it is important to think about all the different people that are going to interact with your system when you're thinking about trialing it. So it's not just the researchers and students. They're obviously some of our primary stakeholders. They're going to be using it every day, but they all have slightly different needs to the group leaders and the people running the course modules and the teaching staff. But also there'll be different people, you know, for example, our head of chemistry was very involved in this, in the setup. Health and safety gets linked into ELNs, so the people involved in health and safety are very important, but also thinking about all the people that are going to be supporting that system. So it's, I think, a really useful exercise if you are looking to trial a system like this is to go through and think about all of the different levels of stakeholders, the different things they're going to need from the system, and make sure that all of those things are being met. So in terms of our trial group identification, things we kind of learned along the way in our decade-long, quite well, in fact, I've been working on it for a decade. I think I worked out that across our research group, if I put everybody's experience together, we had over 100 human years of experience working in this area. But you know, people are often not very keen to change methods. So we didn't really want to target people. You know, people were very welcome to get involved, but in terms of picking which groups to target, we were quite keen to target early adopters, so new PhDs and postdocs, people who didn't already have entrenched ways of working, who might be keener to get involved in this. And you know, actually having approval from the top and people championing this is really, really important as well. So when I did my PhD research, I kind of identified that where you had group leaders and supervisors that were really pro this kind of thing, their students and staff were actually more likely to be interested as well. So we got group leaders to volunteer their group, and then the researchers and postdocs within those groups were involved in our trial. And we also involved our head of chemistry and our health and safety team to make sure that, you know, we're following policy, we're making sure we're compliant, but also that the ELN is actually fit for the school, not just people are going to use it and it won't work with how we do things. Just briefly, we did some initial onboarding information. We wanted to firstly understand where we were at with people. So were they transitioning from a different ELN system? Were they using paper? But also to get a really solid idea of the different areas that they were working in, whether they had hardware requirements or not, and also what they were hoping to get out of this so we could have a better understanding. And we used all of this to form the ELN training, how we set up the ELN, and also then how we acquired hardware throughout the trial. So we did, what was really important to think about here is it's not, implementing an ELN is not as simple as just buying some licenses and giving it to people. There's quite a lot of different stages. And also some ELNs are quite complicated to set up. Signals was fairly complicated to set up in terms of getting everything in place. So the team who set up the trial, we first got trained in how to actually administer and set up the back end. We were then able to do all of that setup, define all our user roles, accounts, hierarchies, how sharing should look, etc. We then created templates associated with the types of data and the types of experiment that people will be doing based on our onboarding. We were able to get hold of quite a lot of hardware, luckily, to use in our trial, because Revvity Signals is a browser-based ELN, and it does need, you know, it runs on quite a low-spec computer. So we were able to give people computers to use because actually, again, back on our previous research, dedicated in-lab hardware was a key to success and something that I saw implemented very well at the University of Nottingham, which I'm sure Jonathan will mention when I went to see their AI for Room setup. And we wanted to give people that opportunity to just use it directly in the lab. And then we also put together some very specific training, not just for the users, but for the group leaders as well. And we had some interactive sessions. And we checked in with the users quite a lot over this period of time. So we did a formal launch where we explained what we were trying to achieve, what we were doing, what the aims were. We had hands-on sessions for training. We targeted the group leaders first because they're busier. So we made sure that they understood how to do their roles. And then we had longer training for the researchers, so how to actually use it, how to use those templates, how to fill in their experiments properly. We also gave everyone a choice about sharing. So in Revvity, sharing is very granular. You can share between particular people, or you can have entire groups where things are shared between them. Our sort of hierarchy is research group based. So people have an option to share across your group if nothing is private and you want to learn from each other. But equally, if things are embargoed or people are working on sensitive things, then they absolutely don't have to. You can just have a group leader to researcher sharing. And then in terms of the trial, we were very involved. Again, we didn't just say, well, we've trained you now, off you pop. We had myself and Matthew Partridge, who was the other trial leader. We were very available as points of contact throughout. People knew they could pop in and see us or send us questions. We had twice monthly check-ins for the groups, and we also ran ELN surgery. So again, that sort of continued support and being there to fix people's problems, people understanding that they have someone to come to and you'll actually help them is really important, because otherwise they're just likely to disengage. We also did a lot to streamline our health and safety, which is very cool. So when we first started running the ELN, we just said, well, do health and safety as you already were. You have to fill in your documents, you have to follow the same procedure, nothing's changed there, and then upload them into the ELN and then put them in our central SharePoint. But the users didn't like that. They really wanted to have everything integrated within the ELN. So Matthew actually created our health and safety workflow inside the ELN. So now every single risk assessment and COSH form is all created within our ELN system. It's all linked to the relevant experiments, which now is fantastic because it means that actually everything is centralized, everything is in one place. It's a lot easier for the researchers. It's also a lot easier for their health and safety team. We've got some auto completion in there, but not enough that people can just sort of switch off and stop thinking about it. But again, I think researchers really like to have everything in one place, and we are thinking about what other workflows we can fold into the ELN. But that was a really big win for everyone involved in the trial. And then just to briefly go over some feedback. So when we started the trial, about 70% plus were using paper. They came to this completely cold, not having used another ELN. They were paper-based. And then at the end, we actually ended up with the majority of the users wanting to continue using, not just an ELN, but to continue using our ELN, which is really, really exciting and very helpful in terms of then promoting why we should be rolling this out to the whole department. So I'd say the sort of very positives of this is, Revvity is fantastic in the sense that it links in with ChemDraw. People found that ELN really useful because the group leaders has much better oversight of people's work. The templates were helping actually capture better, more consistent data. The challenge, I will say hardware is a big challenge, and that is actually one of our discussion points later on, because there was quite a lot of a requirement for more hardware for the users, which of course then you have to think about cost and capacity. We had a few teething issues around logins and mobile support, but we were able to fix those. So again, those were just minor things, and it was good that we were in constant contact with the researchers because they could feed back to us when things weren't going well. And then just briefly, to me, the really important aspects of ELN adoption is aligning with your stakeholders, make sure that you're actually producing a system that people want to use and that fits with those different stakeholder needs, clearly laying out your roles and expectations. How are people going to be using the ELN? Who's responsible for what bit in terms of the administration or software backups or other things? Who's actually in charge of that? In terms of engaging with the users, make sure you have a clear adoption strategy. So regular check-ins, really support them, make sure that they're not just left on their own because they might then disengage. And again, to really have also iterative development and feedback as well. So don't just have a static system. If there's clearly a problem or an improvement to be made, like we did with the health and safety, you can go in and then add that. And then just to say, in terms of our rollout stages, so we have now fully documented everything that we've done. We have training decks for all the different areas. So we have got an appointed ELN lead for the school now, but then, there is such material that now if something horribly went wrong, the whole ELN could be recreated from scratch. We have a data exit strategy, so all of our records are pulled out of the ELN every day and stored in our file store. So we've tried to be as kind of future-proofing as possible. We've trained lots of different teams in the university to administer different areas, and we have a regular rollout for the training now for the different groups as new PhDs and new undergrads come in. And we are planning the full undergrad rollout for September 2026 in line with the new student intake. And then Philip gave a beautiful introduction to PSDI, so I don't need to talk too much about that, but just to say these are our details if you want to get more involved with us.